Good morning everyone. Today I'll be talking on tracheostomy, indications and its weaning. So my today's talk will cover briefly about the history of tracheostomy, indication and contraindication, then about the tracheostomy procedures, then weaning of a patient with a tracheostomy from a ventilator, and finally the summary. So nothing starts without the history. It is one of the oldest surgical procedure. The word tracheostomy is derived from two words meaning I cut trachea in Greek. The first well-documented tracheostomy was done by Antonius Musa in a patient with a laryngeal abscess in 1546. Then the present technique of tracheostomy was standardized by Chevalier Jackson in 1921. The modern percutaneous tracheostomy was first performed by Toy and Winston in 1969. These are some of the devices which have been used in the past to perform tracheostomies in the patients. So tracheostomy, it is defined as a surgical procedure that creates an opening in the anterior wall of the trachea to facilitate the airway access and the ventilation. Broadly, the tracheostomy has been divided into three broad categories. Depending upon the timing, it could be the elective tracheostomy or the emergency tracheostomy. Depending on the cause, it could be the permanent tracheostomy or a temporary tracheostomy. Depending on the way we perform the tracheostomy, it could be the open surgical tracheostomy or the percutaneous tracheostomy. So the indications for tracheostomy could be the emergent indication or the elective indications. Emergent indications include the upper airway obstruction, where an endotracheal tube cannot be placed, patients with the fractures of face, oropharynx and the neck, penetrating tracheal injuries, and the emergency cricothyrotomy. While the elective tracheal indications are the prolonged mechanical ventilation, which is usually of more than 7 to 10 days, patient with poor airway protection, those who need the mechanical ventilation, patient with severe vocal cord paralysis and severe subglottic stenosis not responding to the conventional therapy, and patient who need more effective pulmonary hygiene can also be electively tracheostomized. However, it is important to note that the previous tracheostomy or neck surgery is not a contraindication for performing a tracheostomy. In fact, in such case scenario, percutaneous tracheostomy should be considered. The absolute contraindications for performing a tracheostomy are the neck cellulitis, absence of cervical trachea due to the prior resection or laryngectomy, and the severe coagulopathy. While the relative contraindications are the hemodynamic instability, severe hypoxemia, in general, FiO2 of more than 70% or a PEEP of more than 12 cm are considered relative contraindication for performing a tracheostomy. While the distorted anatomy, tracheomalacia, and age of less than 15 years are considered relatively contraindicated for doing the percutaneous tracheostomy. Now I'll be telling briefly about the tracheostomy procedure, both percutaneous and the open surgical tracheostomy. So before understanding the procedure, it is very important to know the basic tracheal anatomy. The trachea, it lies in the midline. It extends from cricoid cartilage superiorly to the tracheal bifurcation inferiorly at the level of T5 vertebra. It comprises of 16 to 20 C-shaped cartilage rings and its length is about 10 to 12 cm. For cricothyrotomy, the incision or a needle puncture is usually done at the level of the cricothyroid membrane as shown by this arrow. While in open surgical tracheostomy or in the percutaneous tracheostomy, a vertical incision of 1 to 2 cm is taken at the level of the second to fourth tracheal ring. It is also important to note that sometimes an aberrant innominate artery is present right in front of the trachea, and it is very important to rule out the presence of this artery before going for the tracheostomy. And nowadays it can easily be ruled out by scanning the neck with the ultrasound, and if it is present, the percutaneous tracheostomy becomes absolute contraindication. However, open tracheostomy can be done carefully in such patients. So the different components of the tracheostomy tube are the outer cannula, inner cannula. This inner cannula is not present in all of the tracheostomy tube. Other components are the cuff of the tracheostomy tube, pilot balloon which is used to inflate this cuff, flange and the obturator. The function of the obturator is to occlude the tracheal lumen and to support the body of the tracheostomy while the tracheostomy is being inserted into the trachea. So I am going to tell you briefly about the open tracheostomy procedure. So to do a open surgical tracheostomy, first of all, thyroid cartilage is palpated as shown in this figure. And once the thyroid cartilage is palpated, the index finger is rolled down to feel for the cricoid cartilage, as shown here. And once the cricoid cartilage is identified, a vertical incision of 1 to 2 centimeter is given opposite the 2nd to 6th tracheal ring. And the subcutaneous tissue and the muscles are dissected and the trachea is exposed. And once the trachea is exposed, a vertical incision is taken between the tracheal rings to create an opening in the trachea. Once this opening is created, the tracheostomy tube is inserted into this opening. Now the percutaneous tracheostomy, it is a bedside procedure that allows the tracheostomy tube to be placed using the Seldinger technique with dilatation of the tracheal rings rather than the dissection. So one of the major difference between the percutaneous tracheostomy and the open tracheostomy is that in percutaneous tracheostomy the structures are dilated, they are not dissected and cut, unlike the open surgical tracheostomy. So what are the advantages of doing percutaneous tracheostomy over the open surgical tracheostomy? First is that it can be done bedside. Secondly, it reduces the risk associated with the transfer of the patient. It is less expensive and there is less waiting time. So there is no, as it can be done bedside, so there is no need for the availability of the operation theatre for doing the percutaneous tracheotomy. Now briefly about the procedure of the percutaneous tracheostomy. As I have told previously, presence of innominate artery becomes a contraindication for performing a PCT. Now after identifying all the landmarks for the percutaneous tracheostomy, first of all, this fiber optic scope is inserted through the endotracheal tube, and then the needle is inserted in between the 2nd and 3rd tracheal ring, and the entry of the needle can be seen clearly on the fiber optic bronchoscope monitor. However, a caution should be taken not to puncture the endotracheal tube cuff while puncturing the 2nd or 3rd tracheal ring, and it is unlikely to puncture when we are using a fiberscope monitor. Once the needle is inserted, the guide wire is inserted through the needle, and this guide wire can be seen entering the trachea on the fiberscope monitor. Then over this guide wire, the introducer is inserted, which is again can be seen going into the trachea in the fiberscope monitor. Now after the insertion of the introducer, the rhinodilator is used to dilate the tract for the tracheostomy, and once the tract is completely dilated, the tracheostomy tube is inserted into the patient. So why do we want our patients to undergo a tracheostomy when the endotracheal tube can be kept for more days? So the rationale for doing tracheostomy over endotracheal tube is that the tracheostomy tube can be quickly changed when compared to the endotracheal tube. For changing an endotracheal tube, the patient needs a deeper level of sedation and the muscle relaxant, while the tracheostomy tube can be changed under mild sedation or under topical anesthesia. The other major advantage of doing the tracheostomy over endotracheal tube is the improved respiratory dynamics. Now there is ample amount of literature which supports the fact that tracheostomy reduces the work of breathing, airway resistance, peak inspiratory pressure, and the autopsy. Although it is an older study, but it is important to know the changes in the work of breathing induced by the tracheostomy in the ventilator-dependent patients. So this study included 8 patients, and they measured the work of breathing at 3 identical levels of pressure support before and after the tracheostomy. And they found a significant reduction in the work of breathing, pressure time index of the respiratory muscle, and the resistive and the elastic work. And out of 8 patients, 3 patients had improved synchrony immediately after the tracheostomy. Another important advantage of doing tracheostomy over the endotracheal tube is the improved patient comfort and reduced need for the sedation. So in this was a retrospective study which included 72 patients, and they tried to find out the change in the fentanyl dose and the midazolam dose after the tracheostomy was done, and they found a significant reduction in the fentanyl dose, which decreased from 866 microgram to 71 microgram per day, and similarly the midazolam dose also decreased significantly from 44 milligram to 7 milligram per day, and the time for the heavily sedated was also decreased from 7 to 1 hour per day without any increase in the agitation of the patient. So the other advantage of doing the tracheostomy over the endotracheal tube is the facilitation of the weaning, improved patient communication and the swallowing, improved mobility, improved secretion clearance and the oral hygiene, and the patient can be managed outside the intensive care ICU. In fact, these patients can also be managed at home with the tracheostomy in situ. Now the next important question is the timing of the tracheostomy. When should our tracheostomy should be done? So most of the centers, they prefer to do a tracheostomy after 7 to 10 days of mechanical ventilation. However, tracheostomy can be done before 7 days, which can depend upon the patient condition and the status of the patient. Now, depending upon the timing of tracheostomy, the tracheostomy can be divided into early if it is done within 10 days of mechanical ventilation, and it is considered as a late tracheostomy if it is done after the 10 days of mechanical ventilation. Now, this was a prospective observational study, and in this study, they make two groups. One was the early tracheostomy group and the other was the late tracheostomy group. And they found that the patients with the early tracheostomy group, they were able to verbally communicate 7.4 days earlier, while their return to oral intake was also earlier by 7 days. They performed out of bed exercise 6.2 days earlier, and there was no difference in the ICU stay and the mortality. This is another retrospective study which included 258 patients, and they divided the patients into two groups, early tracheostomy and the late tracheostomy. And they also found that the early tracheostomy was associated with lower 90 days mortality, shorter ventilation day, shorter length of hospital and the ICU stay, as well as lower hospital cost. This was another randomized controlled trial on the early versus the late tracheostomy, and it was done in the 12 Italian ICU, and they recruited 419 patients, and they divided patients into early and the late. However, they did not find a clinically significant difference in the incidence of pneumonia. However, the trend was to have lower incidence of pneumonia in the early tracheostomy group. And they also found that the number of days of the ventilatory free days and the ICU free days and the successful weaning and the ICU discharge was more common with the early tracheostomy group. Now, finally, this was the meta-analysis which was published in the Cochrane, and they included the 8 RCTs, and overall they included 1,977 patients, and they studied the length of ICU stay, mortality and the mechanical ventilation day, and they divided the study into two groups, early and the late tracheostomy group, and they found an evidence of moderate quality which showed lower mortality rates in the early tracheostomy group. However, there was no difference in the incidence of pneumonia between the two groups. Now about the post-tracheostomy management. It is important to take care of the inner cannula and the stoma site care, which will help in maintaining a patent airway to prevent infection, to maintain the skin integrity, and to help prevent the tube dislodgement. So first of all, to take care of the inner cannula and the stoma site, this inner cannula is removed from the tracheostomy, and it is then cleaned with the water and the brush, and then it is reinserted back into the patient tracheostomy after it is being dried and cleaned. After this, the area adjacent to the stoma and the area beneath the flange of the tracheostomy tube is cleaned with the cotton swab in a direction of 12 o'clock to 9 o'clock. Secondly, it is also important to properly secure the tracheostomy tube, and Velcro ties can be used to secure this tracheostomy tube. While tying the tracheostomy tube, one should take care that a 1 finger space should be there between the ties and the neck. It is to prevent the neck ulcers, and it should be changed whenever it is wet or soiled, and at least once in a week. Now, suctioning plays a very important role in maintaining the patency of the tracheostomy tube. So it is also important to select the appropriate size suction catheter. A rough formula to calculate the size of the catheter is to add 4 to the size of the tracheostomy tube. Suppose if a patient had a tracheostomy tube size of 8, then the suction catheter of 12 French should be used for the suctioning. Similarly, in the pediatric patient, if the tracheostomy tube size is 4, then the suction catheter used should be of 8 French. It is also important to take care of the pressure, and the vacuum pressure should be around 80 to 120 millimeter of mercury, which corresponds to 16 to 20 kilopascal. And the suction catheter should be inserted approximately around 15 centimeter inside the adult's trachea, and the duration of suctioning should be less than 15 seconds, and 3 times suctioning should be done per session. Now about the cuff tracheostomy care. An underinflated cuff can lead to inadequate seal around the cuff. It increases the risk of aspiration. It can result in an inadequate ventilation. So the recommended cuff pressure to prevent this side effect is 25 to 30 centimeter of water. And if leak is present at the higher pressures, then it is recommended to increase the tube size. Palpation of the external balloon is not an adequate method of pressure estimation, which is used quite routinely everywhere. So we should use this manometer device to measure the pressure in the cuff of the tracheostomy tube. Now, another important issue in the post-tracheostomy is the maintenance of the humidification of the air. So the air which is entering the patient trachea, if it is cold, it can injure the patient trachea, and it can also result in the tube obstruction. So two types of humidifiers are available. One is the heated humidifier and the other ones are the HME humidifiers. Heated humidifiers, they can cause high temperature and humidity, which can increase the risk of infection. So nowadays HME humidifiers are recommended. The study was published in Indian Journal of Critical Care Medicine, and they have recommended to use the HME humidifiers for maintaining the humidification in the patients with tracheostomy. It is also important to communicate early with the tracheostomy patient. For that, speaking valves can be used, and here in this study they have used the inline speaking valves in 129 patients, and they found a significant decrease in time from tracheostomy to establishing verbal communication, which decreased from 18 days to 9 days, while there was no change in the duration of mechanical ventilation and there was no change in the time to decumulate. Now the dysphagia is quite common in the post-tracheostomy, in the tracheostomized patient, and the incidence is around 50 to 70%, and the major factors are the anatomical factors and the functional factors, which include the reduced laryngeal elevation, reduced cough response, and diffuse atrophy of the laryngeal muscle. It also increases the risk of aspiration pneumonia. So to diagnose the dysphagia in this patient, fiber optic endoscopic evaluation, video fluoroscopic evaluation, and modified methylene blue test can be done. And out of these tests, methylene blue test has been found to be best with respect to the sensitivity and the specificity. So in methylene blue test, 1 to 2 ml of methylene blue is mixed with the food of the patient, and if the methylene blue is found in the tracheostomy site, then it is considered as a positive methylene blue test. Now it is also important to intermittently deflate the cough of these patients who have got tracheostomy to reduce the risk of tracheal mucous injury. And the patient starts breathing through a natural path. They restore their speech quickly, and they have a faster recovery if their cough is deflated intermittently. So the criteria for the cough deflation is that patient should be hemodynamically stable. They should have a FiO2 requirement of less than 40%. Their sputum should be thin and easy to suction out, and their above cough secretion should be less than 1 ml per hour. In addition, they should have a good cough strength before deflating the cough. Now this study was done to know the effects of the tracheostomy cough deflation during continuous positive airway pressure, and they found that the airway pressure and the hemodynamics such as heart rate, respiratory rate, and the SpO2, they were comparable in both the groups. This was another RCT where they divide the patients into two groups, one with the cough inflation and the other one with the cough deflation, and they found that the cough deflation group had a faster weaning from the ventilator. They had a lower respiratory infection rate, and the swelling function was improved significantly in the deflated group. Now the next question is when to change our tracheostomy tube. The first change in the tracheostomy tube is recommended after 5 to 7 days following the surgical tracheostomy, and the rationale is to establish a track so that there are decreased chances of the false track formation. While electively afterwards, the tube can be changed every 28 to 30 days and whenever required for the weaning purpose. So I am going to tell briefly how to change a tracheostomy tube. So first of all, the cuff is inflated. This is a new tracheostomy tube, and first of all the cuff should be checked for any leak or rupture, and once this cuff is checked, it should be deflated completely, and then the jelly should be applied. After this, thorough suctioning of the patient trachea should be done. Then a new suction catheter is introduced into the patient trachea, and the older tracheostomy tube is removed, and over this suction catheter, new tracheostomy tube is guided into the patient trachea. Now coming to the weaning from the ventilator. The criteria for weaning is that the patient should be hemodynamically stable. They should be able to maintain the adequate oxygenation, preferably FiO2 of less than 40%, and their initial etiology should have been resolved or should have been considered. They should have a GCS stable, and they should be able to maintain their airway, and infection, especially the pulmonary infection, should be under control. Now these are the different stages for weaning a patient from a ventilator. So in stage 1, first of all, the patient is weaned from a controlled mode of ventilation to the spontaneous mode, and in stage 2, the pressure support is gradually decreased by 2 cm every 6 to 12 hours if their respiratory rate is less than 30 and the tidal volume is more than 5 ml per kg, and the target is to achieve a pressure support of 12 cm of water. Then in stage 3, the patient is kept off ventilator for 1 hour out of 6 hours, and for 5 hours the patient is given pressure support ventilation. And in the night time, pressure support ventilation can be given, and if required, the support can be increased. Then in stage 4, the pressure support ventilation is decreased to 4 hours, and the off ventilation time is increased to 2 hours. Again, in the night, the patient can be kept on pressure support ventilation. Then in stage 5, this time decreased to 2 hours for pressure support ventilation, and off ventilation should be around 4 hours. And in stage 6, the patient should be kept on TPs all day, and if it tolerates this, trial of cuff deflation should be given, and if required, nighttime pressure support ventilation with a maximum support of 8 cm water can be given at this stage. And in stage 7, the downsizing and the decannulation of the tracheostomy is done. Now this table is showing the different causes which are reversible causes for failure to wean from mechanical ventilation, and one should try to rule out these causes if the patient is unable to wean from the mechanical ventilation. Now, if a patient is not able to wean from the mechanical ventilation, first of all, the full physical examination of the patient should be done. Then all recent imaging and the latest lab investigation should be reviewed, and all major organs should be optimized. And the weaning should be considered as stages, not days. The patient may spend number of days on one stage or may skip 2 other stages if he is making a rapid progress. Now, this was a retrospective study of 129 patients, and they found that the weaning was much faster in a patient who had an etiology of neurosurgery and the cardiology. Now coming to the tracheostomy in the liver disease patients. So there is a very scarcity of literature on the tracheostomy in the liver disease patient. So this was one of the retrospective study which was done in 73 patients. The study was from ILBS only. 10 patients had a bleeding in the first 12 hours after the tracheostomy was done. Out of these 10 patients, 7 underwent surgical tracheostomy and 3 underwent the percutaneous tracheostomy. And they have concluded by saying that the coagulopathy should not be deterrent for the performance of tracheostomy, and tech-guided correction ensures lesser incidence of bleeding in these patients. This is another study on the tracheostomy following the liver transplantation. It was a retrospective study, and they included 130 liver transplant patients, and out of 130, 11 underwent the tracheostomy. And they tried to find out the predictors for post-liver transplant surgery tracheostomy, and they found that the MEL score of more than 35, AST level of more than 600, and a fluid balance of more than 6 liter were the risk factor for the post-transplant tracheostomy. Last but not least is this retrospective analysis. It was a large retrospective analysis of 44,745 patients, and they divided the patients between open tracheostomy and the percutaneous group, and they found a higher rate of hemorrhagic complication, and they also found that the open tracheostomy itself is a risk factor for tracheostomy related complication. So they recommended to use percutaneous tracheostomy in a cirrhotic patient. Finally, to summarize my talk, the 2 commonly used ways of doing tracheostomy are the surgical tracheostomy and the percutaneous tracheostomy. Percutaneous tracheostomy, they offer many benefits and is a good alternative to surgical tracheostomy. Early tracheostomy is associated with better short-term outcomes and in terms of the ICU and the hospital stay. Guidelines on tracheostomy in liver disease patients are lacking, demanding immediate action. Thank you very much.